Hello lovelies, welcome back to my channel. This week we are working on the bodice for the 18th century Sarah Sanderson costume. Yes, I am not only wearing, but I am filming this intro the same day that I filmed last week's intro. The reason for this is because, well, I am actually making them at the same time. I'm filming the content at the same time. I'm doing the mock-up and patterning process at the same time. And yeah, so why not? This week, we are going to be focusing on constructing the bodice. So last week, I did show you at least the embroidery process, digitizing it, as well as stitching it out and kind of making our little like Sarah Sanderson bodice textile, which is inspired by the stays-like bodice that she has in the movie. I did want to incorporate this flower motif that she has on her stays, but I also wanted to make it embroidery because there was a sample of like embroidered fabric that I was basing this dress off of, and I just thought that this would be fun and make sense. So if you're interested in how I got to the embroidery stage, you'll want to check out last week's video, but if you're not really concerned about that and you just want to watch the construction, let's begin. So the first thing that I'm going to be doing for my pattern is basically taking these grids that are on the Patterns for Fashion book, and I'm going to be placing all these pattern pieces on my gridded paper here. From there, I will measure what size these are in and size them how I need to. And then I will add seam allowance and cut them out and start making a mock-up. Okie dokie, so here's where I'm at with my mock-up. The sleeves, I'll just show you. I sewed them up and they are like extremely tight on my arm. Like they're just too tight. So I'm gonna add 1/4 of an inch to each side of this seam, and that should loosen this up just enough because like basically I cannot move my arm, like it's so tight, and when it is attached, it's impossible. So I'm gonna add 1/4 of an inch to each side of this on the seam. There we go. For the sleeve, and that should fix that up. So then for this, I've already taken in a bunch of the seams. I took in these two side seam, this seam, and this seam in by 1/2 an inch, or 1/4 of an inch, and the back seam by 1/2 an inch. There will be a skirt attached to this. The top skirt that's like purple and beige will be attached. So I'm hoping the weight of that will hold this down. And I won't have to like worry too much about this kind of being a little loose here. But up at the top, if you see, there's quite a bit of gaping, and I can't really reach it, which is like kind of unfortunate, but I think that I'm gonna kind of change this curve a little bit. I'm gonna take it off and try to rechange it just a bit to get this to not gape so much at the top. And then I'm taking in a tiny bit on the sides at the bottom, about like 1/4 of an inch. So I'll be changing this here on each side. And at that point, I feel like it'll fit. There's also supposed to be boning in this, so like I know that the bones will fix a lot of the wrinkles, because like basically this is just cotton right now, so it wants to like bounce back from any kind of adjustments I make. So I'm gonna make those adjustments, and then we're gonna see kind of how this looked, and then I'll transfer it to my pattern.
He kept going back to Bermuda every winter while his wife stayed home and painted.
Okie dokie. So again, there's going to be a boning channel right here, and then on these sides and in the back. So I think that's going to help with a little bit of the wrinkle. I'm also not really sure what to do about this. I know that this does get folded in because it gets attached to a lining and whatnot. And so I think that when I do that, I can rework this, but I'm also going to put a trim on here. And so honestly, if I have to put a dart into this right here, I'm not mad because I can just hide the dart with the trim. So I think I'm going to make the decision on this right here when I start actually making the garment. And then I also fixed the back. I know it looks crazy right now because of all this that I had to take in. And like, holy crap. I think I took in almost 2 inches. But I like the way it fits now, finally. So I'm going to basically take this off and Sharpie on all of the new seams, the seams that I'm using, and then take this completely apart and transfer it onto my pattern and make the adjustments on my pattern. Yay! Now we can cut it out too. So we will cut this out and then I'll embroider it. The way that these videos are coming out, you've already seen the embroidery stuff. So I'm not going to leave a lot of footage of the embroidery in here. I'm just going to go straight from embroidery to assembling the next pieces. So I think what we'll do is we'll finish up our pattern, cut to me working on the lining, and then putting the lining and the fashion fabric together, making the trim that will go here and the sleeves and stuff. So yay! Hello friends, so I am back working on the lining for the bodice. Basically, I was filming the embroidery video and this video at the same time. Timeline wise, I had to do all of the mock-up and all of that kind of stuff first, so I could do the embroidery and then I had to basically embroider all of the fabric. So now I can actually move on to the lining, and I actually should have been working on the lining while my embroidery machine was going, but I'm going to be very honest with y'all. I've had a very lazy couple of days. I just felt like watching YouTube videos and snacking and working on a couple of admin things. That's just where my brain has been. So here we are. The lining is cut. I just pulled a random cotton from my stash that I had exactly 1 yard of. There was a moment where I thought it wasn't going to be enough, but it is. And we're going to come back to this later, but I'm just going to let you know this is all I have left of this silk. And I was going to do a little like ruffly detail around the neckline. So we're going to see later on, once I've gotten the lining and the bodice pieces together, if this will be enough to do that. I should have thought this through and gotten 2 yards, but you know what? I'd rather have this much left over as waste and have to make it work for something than have a whole yard left over where I'm like, oh man, I have a yard extra. So with that being said, I'm going to start, I think, with just the lining. So we're going to do all these steps in the lining. I'm going to add boning, and then I'm going to repeat it all for the outer fabric. I probably will do this once in voiceover where I just explain all the steps. And then once we get to the lining fabric or the fashion fabric, fashion layer, I'll just sew it and show you a little bit of pretty footage of that. I'm going to try to get this bodice done by the end of tomorrow. So we'll see if that works, and if that happens, that would be really lovely. I should mention too, I don't know if I've mentioned this at all in any of this footage. There's going to be a skirt attached to the bodice. So technically it's going to be a dress, and it's going to be the purple skirt that is going to be like open so that the red underskirt or the petticoat shines through. This video will only cover the bodice, and when we finish this video, I will likely just like fussy like press or figure out a way to press that bottom just so you don't see it fraying for the final footage. But I do want to make sure that I say that now so that while I'm making it, when I don't go to finish that, you're not confused. This is a long talking part, but you know what? I like talking to y'all. So hello, hi. All right, let's do this. Let's get this lining made. I'm starting with the sleeves, and I just am gonna sew a little bit of a pleat right in here on each sleeve. and then we're gonna sew the sleeves right sides together. It's easier to do this first, then sew them together, than it is to like do this step after. So we're gonna do that first. I'm also going to sew this dart on this front piece. I forgot about that, but we're gonna sew that too. After sewing the sleeve pleat and the dart at the front of the bodice, I stitched together the center back panels, then I added the side back panels followed by the front panels. From there, I thoroughly pressed the seams open. Then I pinned a ribbon for boning channels on top of each seam and on the marked spot for the front panel, leaving about 3/4 of an inch at the top and bottom of each seam. Once it was all pinned, I took my lining over to my machine and stitched it down. All right, so I put in all of the boning after I finished sewing up the boning channels, and then I went to grab some lunch so I could eat something. And now I am basically going to sew all of the like fashion fabric pieces together, just like I did this. So starting with the sleeves and the darts, like the pleat on the sleeves, and then the darts on the front piece, and then I will assemble it all. I'm gonna leave it flat like this just for now, get that assembled, and then I haven't decided the next step. Starting at the center front, I pinned the lining to the fashion fabric, making sure to match seam lines and only sewing a couple of inches on the bottom front on each side. I am attaching a skirt later, so I want this bottom edge to stay mostly open for now. Then I stitched them together with their right sides together, following all of my pins and making sure that I sewed all of this down at about a 1/2 inch seam allowance so that I wouldn't run into any boning channels. Then I made sure to trim my corners and clip my curves before flipping the garment to the right sides out. Finally, I press all of the edges so that they lay really flat and nice and crisp. To make the trim, I marked the last bit of scraps at 1.5 inches wide and cut that into strips with my pinking shears. From there, I stitched all the strips together and pressed the seams. Then I just folded the strip into box pleats by eye. I didn't really measure or keep track of any of this, but from there I pinned it onto my bodice at the neckline, and then the process of hand sewing started. All right, so this is where I am at. I have sewn down all of my little pleated trim. I did this during D&D last night, so I didn't film it. I thought about getting just a glimpse of our party and like where we're at, because we're doing the Curse of Strahd. But I hand stitched all of this down, and I hate that you can, like, I hate the hand stitching. I also really want to add sparkle. Please don't hate me. I know there's going to be somebody here that's going to be like, blah, 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 historical accuracy, and I'm going to be here to say, but sparkles and glitter and shiny things. So here is my line of seed beads. These are just from my stash. I'll try to link them below if I can find them again, but I'm gonna do them all the way along in the inside. The one thing is I only have literally these 2 strips of this fabric left. So I cannot do them on the sleeve. So I think I'm just gonna have no design on the sleeve except for the flounce. And then for the flounce, I'm gonna add sparkles to that. But we'll get to the sleeve flounces at some point. And then just like, so like, this is what it looks like. The front. I'm glad I picked this. Like this pink kind of matches. I was looking for the Hocus Pocus cotton at Joann Fabrics to make the lining of this because I feel like that's just really appropriate. But I couldn't find any in my store and I am not going to go hunting online for it. So I don't need it. I just wanted it. So this is going to be really pretty. I really like this. Really quick before I set myself up on my table. These are the beads. So these are the beads, and then this is kind of what they look like. So, Fire Mountain Gems. This is actually where I get most of my beads. I really like them. You can buy them in bulk or in like, this is like one of the smaller sizes, but the more items in general you buy, so like this box is considered 1 item, I think. And like the more items you buy, the cheaper your entire bill is, which is pretty radical. So I typically will do like 1 purchase a year of whatever I think I need. And then, yeah. Before I could start the process of sewing the sleeve lining to the sleeve, I still needed the lacy flounce bit at the edge of the sleeve. I bought this magenta lace off fabric.com to mimic the long magenta lace sleeves Sarah has on under her bodice. Then, using the same pattern from Patterns of Fashion 1, I cut out some flounces, I stitched the 2 tiers together, and then I added a gather stitch so I could gather them down inside of the sleeve. I pinned and gathered the flounce to the silk fashion layer with the right sides together. Basically, to do this, I pinned it at what I thought was the halfway point and then obviously the seams. And then I pulled the 2 gather strings together until it was evenly distributed, stitched that down, and then once I was done, it would flip out and all look really great. Then I could pin and sew the lining right sides together to the silk fashion layer and then stitch this down about 1/2 inch from the edge as well. Now I could flip this right side out and then I would actually tuck the lining inside the actual silk sleeve area and pin that together up at the top. Okie dokie, so I have pinned this in to the right sides, not lining up my notch with my back seam and my notch with my armpit seam, side seam, I don't know. And then now I have all this extra and I'm gonna basically by hand put a gather stitch through this, and then that way I can ease all of this into my little space down here. I am doing this whole sleeve by hand. I did this for my Wanda jacket and I found that I just liked how it turned out better than if I had done it by machine. So I'm doing it by hand. Once I've gotten the silk layers together, I'm gonna fold this inside itself, the cotton layers. Oh my gosh, this is the cotton, and I'm gonna fold it over this whole seam to hide it. So here's how the final bodice turned out. I am not recording this part with it on my body because it doesn't exactly fit. So in the next 2 weeks, I have to pull apart the majority of this bodice, put it back together with some adjustments, and hope that it will fit on my body. I will include that in a video 2 weeks from now, but I still wanted to share with you all what I did accomplish and how it should basically look once it's all done. I would like to thank everybody for watching this video, and a special shout out to those of you that have supported me over on Patreon. I really appreciate it, and I did get the Glinda fabric in, and we've got some more stuff to order for Glinda soon. So if you would like to support this channel and the things that I create on it, head on over to patreon.com/CaseyReneeCosplay. Otherwise, I will see you all in 1 week with a video on how I'm making the petticoat for this dress. And until then, may all your dreams come true. Oh, I sound like I'm gonna burp that whole time. No! Blasphemous! No! Why air conditioning? I haven't had my air conditioning on for 4 days. No, a week now. We turned it off last Wednesday. And so I haven't had to play the whole, like, is the AC gonna pop on during the filming?